Hello, and thank you for joining us on this week's Face-to-Face series. Today, I'm talking with Joji Kokurio. He's the Managing Director of Bay City Ventures in Japan. And we're going to be talking about the recent elections there and whether we're likely to see any further political upsets in the IR process in Japan. We also take a look at some of the destinations that are proposed for IR developments and their relative draws as tourist attractions. Thanks for joining us today, Joji. We just thought we would catch up a little bit on what's been going on in Japan lately, especially after the national elections that you've just had there. It seems to have cleared the way now politically. Was there any surprises?
From the national elections for the lower house, so it's the representatives of a bunch of the areas all over Japan. There were really no surprises. Of course, there's always, the big guys that get elected out, the new guys coming in. But in terms of majority party keeping their seats, not much of a big change. And I think that was kind of the expected result. We do have a very weak opposition minority in political office. So in terms of the IR as well, I guess national politics-wise, no change on that front.
What about, obviously, local politics upended Yokohama quite recently? Are there any other sort of things on the political calendar on a more local level that could have an impact?
At this point, until April of next year, when the applications are due to the national government, there's no big elections, at least for Osaka, Wakayama, and Nagasaki.
So we've got 3 cities now going forward in the IR process: Wakayama, Osaka, and Nagasaki. Is it guaranteed all 3 are going to get an IR license?
Absolutely not. I mean, it could very easily be 0 to, well, I wouldn't say 0, but it could be 0 to 3, to be quite honest. This is an application procedure. So it's a license application. With 3 slots, 3 applications. So it depends on how each one is actually done. And it's not just, submitting a good plan. I mean, there's probity checks, there's requirements that need to be met. So I'd like to hope there'd be at least 1, but in no way is there any promise of all 3 passing.
What kind of things is the government going to be looking at when it assesses whether to give out 1 or 3?
Well, if you want to go to the national requirements page, there's about 50 pages on that. But the key point is that this is supposed to be a driving factor for tourism, and that I think will be definitely a strong point, and it's fairly weighted as well in the evaluation process. The other thing, especially considering a lot of the concerns publicly about casinos and addiction issues, etc., is that they will probably make sure that their probity checks are done at a top gaming industry standard. So I would say those 2 things would be the main points that they're looking for. So
on the ground there in Japan right now, what's the sort of general feeling? Is the general feeling that there will be less than 3?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I mean, if you're in the the local areas, obviously Wakayama, Nagasaki, they're all hoping that there's going to be more than 2, obviously. And Osaka, I would say that there's a bit more confidence, which has to do with just, the experience levels of the companies involved. And also, I would say, the political leadership has been quite vocal on the IR before.
Obviously, there's been some reports recently in the media, well, it wasn't even in the media, it was the company itself said that basically it was advising, current core was advising Shinjo City on a potential IR bid. Is there any possibility at all at this stage that they could come in?
Well, again, it's another regional thing. I would never want to speak for them. But from my point of view, I would say that it's definitely too late. Even if this applies to even Tokyo, for example, that everyone's been looking forward to. If they start from now, it's very hard to say that they have the local consensus. And it's also very difficult to form a very thorough development plan to submit to the government. If you consider that Wakayama Prefecture is already doing explanations for their development plan by the end of this month, that's the stage that they're at. So if you're starting to look for your operator now, I would say it's quite hopeless. Unless you wanted to put in like a 10-page application and see how that goes.
Yeah, it does seem a bit optimistic. So this isn't really going to be the sort of major dream market that everybody had hoped it was going to be when it was first announced in its current stage, is it?
Well, that depends on the operators and how they run their facilities if they get the license. I think at the initial stage, I mean, everyone talks about the numbers and they talk about, when in normal operation. But what I always expect is that, this is a new market. It's always going to be slow at the beginning anyways. And so how you feel that and what kind of plan the operator and the local government has going forward is quite key. So again, yeah, the numbers that were thrown around at the beginning, yeah, we're obviously over optimistic for now. But, who's not to say that 10 years from now with proper development and proper business development, market development, tourism development, it could definitely happen.
Okay. And we've talked a couple of times about tourism development. Obviously, this was the key thing, that this was supposed to drive tourism development. In these three cities, Joji, what would you see as being the key tourism draws? What's the attraction for you?
Well, for me, speaking just from someone that lives here, I mean, Osaka, everyone loves going to Osaka. I've never heard anyone that hates going to Osaka unless they're from there. That's because they're from there. The key things, I mean, they've been a big driver of Eastern Asian tourism, especially growth in the past 10 years, where I think, before it was just Tokyo is the place to go. I think Kyoto is the place to go. And Kyoto is next to Osaka, but Osaka City as well, with Universal Studios development, food culture, shopping culture, they've appealed to a lot of the Asian tourists. So right now, I mean, it's quite quiet compared to how it was before. So I hope to see that bustling again. Wakayama, it's a place, it has a lot of nature, but I think the one thing that people don't really talk about so much about Wakayama is that it's really kind of like a quiet location that's secretly close to a lot of other great things. And so, I don't want to say that, it doesn't have anything there. But if you think about the fact that there is, it's in a marina environment, so it's already considered kind of a high-end destination. It is, of course, very close to the Kansai International Airport. So I think access-wise, I mean, there is a big airport. And the other thing is, for Wakayama itself, there's a lot of culture there that most people don't really talk about. And I always mention to people to visit the Wakayama Castle. And they're like, oh, but castles are out there. It's a 5-minute walk from the main train station. So again, there's culture everywhere in the area. And then last for Nagasaki, I mean, Nagasaki is the food. I mean, I can't say this more. The one great thing about this whole IR thing is I've been able to go to Hokkaido. I've been able to go to Nagasaki. And yeah, I thought I was spoiled in Tokyo, but apparently not. The food is excellent. And the Kyushu region around Nagasaki has a lot of local delicacies and places to visit, whether it's hot spring, etc. So they have a lot of, I would say, tourism resources that are unique to that area. So each place has their own great thing. I live in Yokohama, so if you ask me what's great about this place is that it's close to Tokyo. That's it.
Okay. So what's the next stage for these three companies now, and what are they up to at the moment, and what's the next landmark?
Well, I think it's for us, it's been more of a planning stage. So most of the partners are set. They're all doing the development plans, forming the necessary companies, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of procedural stuff. I'd expect that all three would have their plans, development plans submitted to their local assembly, whether it's prefecture or city, but always has to go to the prefecture at the end. By, I would say, late February, because that's when the assemblies are held. And then, revise some things here and there, submit it to the national government early, mid-April. I guess you could procrastinate till April 28th if you wanted, but yeah, kind of a risk there. So yeah, it's a really quiet stage, and I think if you're not involved in the consortiums themselves, it might also seem kind of boring, to be honest.
Okay. And when are we going to see the first spade in the ground?
I have no clue, but well, at least one thing I could say is that the submission period to the national government end of April. I would expect that the first license approvals, or at least the answers, would come out by the autumn. I think the national government has purposely not really set a date for when they'll give out the approvals, but just speaking usual government work time-wise. So I think depending on there, if it's next autumn, I think we can see those kind of construction ceremonies happening by the end of 2022 at the earliest, but we'll see how long that procedure for licensing takes.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Joji. That's great to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today. I've been talking with Joji Kukurio. He's the Managing Director of Bay City Ventures. Join us every Friday for our series of interviews with thought leaders in Asia's gaming industry.